We're almost a year out from the passage of the CARES Act, and roughly 9 or 10 months passed when funds were distributed to local governments around Alaska. And while that was an ongoing process with multiple iterations of Treasury guidance and interpretation, local governments raced to implement CARES Act funding in support of their continuity of operations, in support of their economy and businesses, and in support of local residents and their most vulnerable populations. Now, nearly a year later, it's a great time to reflect on where we've been, the challenges that were overcome, and where these funds made the most difference. And that's especially important now that we're considering the American Rescue Plan and its impacts on Alaska, and how local governments and others in partnership can achieve the most that they can on behalf of Alaskans.
The city of Dillingham decided to focus on community outreach, public safety, and health.
The groups that advised the city provided us with insight with regard to three key issues: food security, mental health, and housing support and homelessness.
The main point was to get the funding out to small businesses and nonprofits.
We were excited with the possibility of being able to use that funding to offset loss in revenue. Unfortunately, guidance came out that said that was not an allowable expense under the CARES Act funds, and so we had to make adjustments to our budget to reflect that.
To improve efficiency, the city worked with a number of different organizations, from the Chamber of Commerce to the Food Bank to the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, to create programs that would then be administered by those agencies and those groups.
We knew that we could not have any interruption in our services to the public. That included public safety, public works, and our administrative services.
Well, the city of Dillingham has been able to maintain all of our services with some small changes.
Most of our facilities are back up and running at this point, although not at full capacity, to keep our patrons and employees safe.
Because of the way our community is set up, Soldotna is not necessarily the city limits. And unfortunately, people see Soldotna and they apply for a grant, and that grant isn't available to them because they don't actually live inside the city. It's, I think, discouraging to have to tell someone that they're not eligible just because of that reason.
So through the pandemic, it's become, I think, really clear that there needs to be a greater understanding of the authorities that different communities across the state of Alaska have. We have a variety of different types of government. We have two primary types, cities and boroughs, but each of those have various different levels or classes, and the roles and the services that each one of those communities provide are very different.
It's clear that the CARES Act made a difference. It was a lot of work, it was very challenging, and local governments across the state approached it in very different ways. I think now, a year out, it's important to think about where we're headed, to recognize the stewardship of these relief funds that have occurred through the CARES Act, and we think we'll continue with the ARPA funds. But relief from the federal government has empowered local governments to do so much on behalf of their communities, and proven them to be thoughtful and considerate in how they implement their reaction to what has been a public health emergency and economic crisis.